We have with us today Mr. Robert Cormican, and we're doing a little interview here about his past experiences. And first of all, I'd like to ask Mr. Cormican, where were you born and when?
I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, on Elder Avenue, and I was born in the year of 1918.
1918, right before the end of the war, World War I.
Oh, yes.
And a little bit about your parents.
Well, my mother and father was, my mother was Dutch and my father was English. They used to call us Mick Cormican, but somewhere along the line, somebody dropped the Mick and it just was Cormican from then on.
Oh, okay. What did they do for a living?
My mother was just a housekeeper, and my dad, he worked for Richter Transport Company. He was a crane operator and done construction work.
Okay. Well, and growing up, did you have any brothers and sisters?
No brothers. Had two sisters, and each one of them had a brother.
Oh, okay. And family life was pretty enjoyable for you in growing up?
Very enjoyable.
Well, along the road, of course, you eventually you got married, and as far as how did you meet your wife, I'd like to ask that.
Well, I was working for a farmer, $1 a day.
$1 a day.
And he hired this lady to do the cooking. There was two of us working for him. He hired this lady to do the cooking, and we she was about 12 years old then, and that's how I met her. She didn't like me to start with, but we finally got over that.
Okay. So you were married, and along the way in your married life, did you have children yourself?
I had two boys. One of them now lives in Africa. He's been there 44 years. And the other lives in Brooklyn, New York. They both work for the Watchtower Society.
I see. So now your son in Africa, what does he do there?
He's a missionary.
Ah, missionary. Okay. And you mentioned before that you're a religious man yourself. In fact, you are one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. Before you became one of Jehovah's Witnesses, I understand that you were involved in World War II. And I'd like to ask, how did you get involved in that war?
When they drafted me.
Didn't have much of a choice.
I was 25 years old when they drafted me.
So what part of the military were you in, Mr. Cormican?
I was in Patton's 4th Armored Division. We spearheaded and tried to divide the German troops. We always had enemies on 3 sides of us.
I see.
Ahead of us and each side of us.
So do you remember much about General Patton?
Well, Patton made a stand inspection right during the middle of the war, and we had he got on me because I had dirty clothes on, and I tried to explain to him that that's all the clothes I had. That I did change my underwear for wash them, put them back on wet.
How long had you been wearing your clothes?
About 2 months or longer.
Oh, did that make a good name with General Patton?
He didn't like it very well.
What did he say to you? What did he say to you?
Well, he said, "Them sure dirty clothes you got on." I said, "Well, that's all I got." He made us set them up outside of a building, and I don't know where they wound up at.
So when you were in the military, what was your job?
Well, I was a rifleman, and our job was to protect the tanks that we rode. We rode on tanks whenever we encountered fire, and when we had to run alongside the tank and use our rifles to shoot at the enemy.
I see. So, as I was thinking about you and the things we talked about before, we talked about what you saw there when you were in the war. There's a lot of talk today about the Holocaust, and people try to raise accusations that it didn't really happen. There's books on that maybe it was just all made up. What would you have to say to people today that make that statement?
Well, the Holocaust was there. That's all there is to it. We had to go into these camps that they had people in, and we found people stacked up like cordwood inside of a building, and there's slime thrown over them.
That must have been a horrible sight to see.
Yes, it was. Yeah. To see people just stacked up at least 4 foot high. And
any survivors? And
one survivor, one fella, they had herded a bunch of men out and killed all of them in a bunch, but this one fella was laying down next to the wall in the back of the building, and he rolled off of the bed down in behind the bed, and we found him laying there alive. He was the only one that was left alive that couldn't march. Those that was able to march while they was trying to take them someplace else, but our troops overran them and finally freed the people that were been captured.
Now, did you ever have an encounter with any of the German soldiers at all? Or?
Did I ever have an encounter?
Yes. With any of the German soldiers at that time?
Well, yes. Yes, I had an encounter with at least two, that when we were searching out houses in a town, why, they surrendered to me, and I sent them down like towards where our headquarters was, and they didn't get 50 feet away from me till somebody killed both of them.
So what was your feelings at that time? How did you feel when all that happened?
Well, it was devastating to me to see that somebody would do something like that.
But then again, did you think maybe from what they saw with all those dead bodies that could have, we talked about this, do you think that could have had an impact on how that might have led up to that, where those soldiers were killed?
Well, there was just people in the army that I called them murderers, because they wanted to shoot somebody wherever they could.
So, Mr. Cormican, and going from World War II and then becoming one of Jehovah's Witnesses, first of all, I'd like to ask, what led to that?
Well, my wife started associating with the people, and I just told her that there was a bunch of home wreckers, and I didn't have anything to do with them. So I was going to take the Bible and show her just how wrong she was.
As far as how has it affected your view of what you experienced and seeing the injustices back then during the war?
The more I learned about Jehovah and his way of life, and so I eventually wanted to become one.
And so you've been one of Jehovah's Witnesses how many years now?
52 years.
52 years. Well, we are certainly grateful to you that you allowed us to do this interview today. We appreciate the memories that you've kept in your mind there, and that you've been able to share with us today. And especially about your son being a missionary and your other son being up at New York. Any thoughts about them that you'd like to share? Or how you, or what would your wishes be for them?
I worked and tried to keep them supplied with stuff that they needed that the society didn't furnish.
Mm-hmm. And so I imagine they're up in years now. How old are they?
Well, my oldest son is 72 years old, or 70 years old, and the younger one is 68. There's 2 years between them.
Well, I'm sure you're proud of them, and I'm sure that they're proud of you as being their father.
Definitely.
Well, thank you so much for the time that you can spend with us today.
Okay.